This is one of the most successful comedians coming out of India, one of the most talented comedians from India. You only learn from bad shows.
Once you find your voice, nobody can steal your jokes.
You can't steal my jokes also because I don't have any, I only have
You've been on the same cooking station, if I can say.
Cooking station same है, ये veg पका रहा है, मैं non-veg कर रहा हूँ. Stand-up comedy is an outward expression of an inward journey.
करके देख ले तू.
Once you find what is within and you're just comfortable being that is you.
मैंने बहुत शोज ओपन करे हैं सीजे के लिए.
मेरे को मौका नहीं मिल रहा like I said.
न्यू फ्रेंड्स कॉलोनी में वो एक क्लब वाला शो था, वो भी मैंने एक बार ओपन करा था.
Oh, that was a great show.
उसके अगले साल मैंने वो करा था शो पे.
People come to comedy clubs with guns, yeah.
We have small humble memento for you.
Check.
देखो, मुझे मेरे पॉडकास्ट के लिए बहुत धांसू बोनस कंटेंट मिल गया है आपके टाइमिंग की वजह से.
No, we'll just bring him here. Why do you want to remove yourself?
अगर आप आ जाए तो.
Please.
ओहो.
Now this will be the scan. You keep sitting where you are.
नहीं, मैं खड़ा हो जाता हूँ. मेरी हिम्मत है.
You keep sitting where you are.
आइए सर.
आप इस तरफ आ जाओ.
Please, आप बैठो.
By the way, come.
अमित आप अच्छा.
अरे आ गया. By the way, this is one of the most successful comedians coming out of India. One of the most talented comedians from India. This T-shirt has been bought for him. As I don't know whether his wife bought it or whether he bought it, but it says the silent man because that's what she wants. And he has made his entire comedy career talking about exactly this subject. But no, Amit and I go back a long way. And
yes.
I cannot tell you how much joy it has given me to see the success he has got. He's one of the nicest human beings. और कौन आके ऐसे गोद में बैठा है?
बैचलर.
Shall we get a chair for Amit before?
सुनो. इतना साइलेंट आदमी है कि वो बैचलर पापा सीजे की गोदी में बैठ के भी आवाज नहीं निकाल रहा.
उसको पता है मैं तेरे जैसे ठरकी नहीं हूँ निशांत पराशर. इसके हाँ, तू इतना ठरकी है, इसका कंपनी का नाम ही है एंगेज फॉर मोर. ये कैसी बने? What is this more?
merchandise, by the way.
I know that.
Yeah? No surprise.
But it's the most
On brand.
honest branding you could carry. But मैं आपसे ना एक गुजारिश है.
अच्छा, should we get him a chair?
कि आप नहीं यहाँ बैठो.
No, you sit there interview. हम दोनों यहाँ बैठते हैं.
अरे आप इधर आओ, बैठो. आपने मेरे बिहाफ पे
हाँ जी.
3 तड़कते हुए
आ जाना चाहिए.
रोस्टिंग सवाल पूछने चाहिए. आप थोड़ा टाइम दे दो, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है.
नहीं.
अपना ही शो समझो.
Now you're putting me in a spot because to roast
छोड़ना नहीं
CJ.
है. छोड़ना नहीं है.
नहीं सीजे को.
मेरे किनारे काले बाल कौन सा है वो? डाबर वाला केश तेल.
हाँ, I don't color my hair, by the way.
क्या
Let me
बात?
clarify. हाँ,
Really?
सच में तुम्हारी कसम यार.
यार मतलब भाई मैं आप
नहीं, I don't color my
How
hair.
naughty
but
can I
there
be
are-
on this show?
you can
How naughty
see
can I be on
grey.
this? Sir, इनका सिर्फ शोरूम सफेद है, गोडाउन काला है.
मैं तो यूरिया डालता हूं मेरे बालों में. मुझे लोग समझते नहीं कि समझदार हूं.
समझ में नहीं आया सर को.
He doesn't want to acknowledge, but yes, he got it. नहीं यार, CJ को रोस्ट नहीं कर सकते. I started my career, I worked a lot with CJ. So a lot of, वो शुरू में जब open करते हैं तो I have opened a lot for CJ.
Yeah.
And in fact, I got a lot of gigs because of that. A lot of gigs that, he did and I opened, and 2 years later I would get a call when they have lesser budget and they'll be like.
अब मैं दो साल से अमित को ईमेल भेज रहा हूँ यार, मेरे को ओपन करने दे.
अब वो साइलेंट मैन हो गया है.
But I have to tell you this. Just 2 days ago, I was watching a podcast of Amit's. I watched the first 40 minutes. अभी 30 मिनट बाकी हैं. In which he spoke about his first corporate gig.
Yeah, that was through you. You got that gig. Deloitte ka tha, I still remember.
Yeah. And I can't tell you how much joy it gave me to listen to that. Because आप ही सुना दो उसकी कहानी.
So, this was for Deloitte. And that's like one of those life-changing moments for me because tab, when I was doing comedy, I was running my recruitment firm. So this was more like, passion. ये नहीं है, hobby था, was not really a big thing. We were getting paid 3,000, 2,000 rupees for those, जो pub gigs होते थे, उसमें वो पैसे मिलते थे. And this was the first corporate gig that I got. CJ booked me and Abhijit Ganguly for Deloitte, ITC Grand Maratha. Why it was life changing, I'll tell you. we did the gig. That's a longer story. And after the gig, I was in my room, and I had been running a company for 14 years, 30, no, 8 years at that time.
I'm kind of aware of it.
Ha,
Really
so
first
recruitment
time.
firm.
Yes.
Ha. And when you're running your own firm, you take the cheapest flights, you book the cheapest cab, you know the drill, and payment 3 महीने बाद आ रही है, 4 महीने बाद आ रही है. They make you wait for 2 hours outside for a meeting. Also, an HR manager would make you wait, irrespective whether you are running a company, this, that. And this gig I did, and I was like, client ने ticket book किया, and we landed, and there's this big car waiting for us. They put us up in ITC Grand Maratha, and all expenses paid, and payment advance आ गई. I didn't sleep that entire night कि यार ये मतलब passion छोड़ो, ये तो profession ही बहुत अच्छा है. Like, what's better than this? Like, I still remember ITC Maratha, the windows open in that lobby, wo jo central area hai, where you can see the breakfast. I was up, and like, I didn't sleep, and I went for the breakfast directly at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. And I, that's the day I decided that I'm going to pursue this way more seriously, and came back, got a website done, and all of that. So, and that gig came through CJ. In fact, a lot of things that, I even quote CJ when I'm talking to other comedians, the newer ones. A lot of things you remember when I'm, silent man. I normally have, when I'm in room with people who are more experienced, I'm generally very silent. I just like to hear what they have to say, whether it's CJ, whether it's Veer. And I still remember in the beginning, I don't know if you remember that, but CJ used to say that, in a comedy show, people are laughing is great. If they are silent, there's no problem. That still means people are listening. It's only when people are talking, it's a problem. Because as a comedian, what happens is we are always in that panic mode कि 30 सेकंड हो गए कोई हंसा नहीं है. So you always want to move on to your next joke. Whereas sometimes you could have a set which has a 90-second setup, okay, with no jokes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and you have to get comfortable with that silence, which as a comedian a lot of times you don't. You're used to that कि गए stage पे टक 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 and आ गए. And sometimes like, अरे नहीं यार, मैं कुछ और भी कहना चाहता था जो मैं इसलिए नहीं कह पाया क्योंकि मेरे को 30 सेकंड की वो जो साइलेंस है वो बर्दाश्त नहीं होती है as a comedian. That's something that I learned from CJ. I still remember it, but honestly it still takes time to get used to silence, just to keep that 2-minute silence. I'm still working on it, but it's something that I still remember from 2011-12.
Also, now he's a married man with 2 teenage children.
He prays for 2 minutes of silence. I think I completely agree. See, what happens is, when you're married and you have kids, it's, and all these relationships, whether it's with your kids or with your wife, they keep on evolving every year. So there's always something new that's coming out there. So it's always, something interesting, because when they were, pre-teenage versus teenage, now end of teenage, the issues are changing, girlfriend, boyfriends are happening. So every year or two, there's something new that's happening that you can come back and talk about on stage. So that way I like.
So उसमें मतलब I've seen people coming back and saying that this is exactly I was feeling. I did not know how to really
Express it.
say this. And actually, I'm kind of preempting my question, but is this like a therapy you apply to yourself? Because it's quite intense.
Therapeutic. I think as a comedian, it's very therapeutic when, there will be a lot of, because, I think the simplest way of writing stuff, which I read on internet long time back, and I still feel it's one of the best ways of writing, is कि whatever annoys you, the simplest way, when you run out of content, just go back and think, पिछले एक हफ्ते में क्या-क्या बात पे मैं irritate हुआ था, and just write it down. Whether it's getting stuck in the traffic, whether it's, digging happening in front of your house, or it's, you are getting late for, going to a function, and, 9 बजे पहुंचना था, 9:30 बजे your wife is asking you, मैं क्या पहन के जाऊं, and then that discussion of क्या पहनना है, क्या नहीं पहनना है, all of that, if you start writing, that's where all the comedy happens. And when you bring it on stage, it's therapeutic for you क्योंकि तुमने अपनी भड़ास निकाल दी.
I want to ask you a follow-up question since you
हाँ.
spoke about writing.
रोस्टिंग तो आपकी ये देखो
मैं रोस्टिंग नहीं कर रहा सीधे.
मैं इंटरव्यू पूछ रहा हूँ यार. I want to learn. Right? You spoke about your first approaches, the things that annoy you.
Yeah.
What are the other pieces of advice you could give to a writer about how to write stand-up comedy? Are there various joke formats? What are the things you do? How do you start from a blank slate? And what are the steps in going from blank slate to complete show? I would love to know.
So, first of all, stand-up comedy, I think only 5% of stand-up comedy is joke writing. The, punch and, your setup and punch is just, I think, 5% of it. At least for me. Then there are a lot of things, which I think, it's very weird talking to CJ about this because, he's been around for a longer time. I have learned so much from him. But, so there are a lot of pieces. One is observations, pure observations work well. Then nostalgia
so
works
for
very
example, can you...
observation could be as simple as कि अभी मैं लिफ्ट में it's one of the most common ones कि मैं लिफ्ट के बाहर खड़ा हूँ मैंने बटन दबाया हुआ है वो लाल लाइट है but there will be another guy who will come in and he'll still press the button. अरे लाल है एक्सेलरेटर नहीं है वो कॉल बटन ही है. हाँ or when people when you're in the airport and you're I think highest level of stress is when you are at that belt, that security belt where you're putting up stuff. Your flight is still 2 hours away. But that's a line where, there will always be two people who want to cut the line. Yeah. Then there's always one line inspector, who's always like, अरे भैया line में आओ ना भैया line में आओ ना. And उसको जब कोई नहीं मिलता ना तो भी वो disappointed होता है. So those are plain observations, where you see how, what could be annoying somebody else. Okay. So observations is another thing.
Okay, so observation is one, but I also noticed that you observe, but then you add a line.
Yeah.
To get that punch in. So the observation is लाल light है फिर भी क्यों दबा रहा है?
हाँ.
Then you add the accelerator.
हाँ. That right? Yeah.
And even with the one where you spoke about the security thing, एक inspector है. हाँ. That's the observation. Then you say that कि जब कोई है भी नहीं, then also he is angry, right? So which is so I'm just saying because I'm also listening to you and learning how you structure. Okay, तो एक तो observation.
So observations is one. Second, stories. The advantage of stories is that when you're telling a story, so story typically there's a beginning, middle, and end. You start your story always from the most interesting point, and not from the beginning. Like I used to do that set earlier. Now
we still haven't finished storytelling. One of the things you said, you've got to paint a nice visual picture. Yeah. You've got to define the characters really well. What else is important in a story?
Story, what I also keep on doing is I keep on adding observations to it. That's something that I learned from Anubhav Pal. I remember watching a show where he's telling a story. Then, in story, you come to a point, and then you use that as a placeholder, do 2 minutes about something within that, then come back to the story. Yeah. If I am doing a story about, let's say, कि हमारे घर पे, yesterday I was talking about, guests come. And then I'm talking about कि guest आते हैं, I don't like the guest. Broadly the story was, खाना आता है, हमें नहीं मिलता, बाद में मिला, पापा से जान निकल रही थी, मम्मी ने ये करा. That was the story that I had. So, but within that, there was a bit about drawing room which has nothing to do with the story.
So I remember, Harith Iskandar from Malaysia, very good comedian, he's been doing it for a long time. He used to talk about the same thing where it's like a branch of a tree.
Yeah.
You're trying to go to the end of that branch, right? But kabhi-kabhi tum is patte mein chale jate ho. Then you start doing something over there. Then you say, and he used to say, but that's another story. Come back to the branch. Then take it further.
Exactly.
And you these little flights of fancy. But eventually वो कहानी खत्म करके आपको end तक ले जाने का. So as soon as I walked in, I told Nishant, remember when you got married and you used to have sex? He also said, CJ, there's no joke there. एकदम दिल पे लगा है. His veins are popping out of his forehead right now. देखो यहाँ से. Oh, so tomorrow is the day. My favorite jokes, and they're partly my favorite jokes because they come from my favorite comedians. One is from you and one is from Niti. One of his ones is about when you're fighting with your wife, right? He says, can I say this one?
Sure.
He says, when we are fighting with my wife, when I'm fighting with my wife, she's playing chess. जब आदमी और औरत लड़ते ना, औरत चेस खेल रही है. She's thinking 6 moves ahead. आदमी लूडो खेल रहा है. He's just thinking 6 आजा. So good. Just think about it. We keep talking about our fantastic culture, 5,000 years old, history, itna importance. Raste pe jaake hum thukte. Because there is no civic sense. But look at the intelligence of that joke. You pause and there are so many layers to it. And for an audience, like he said, don't simplify it and make it easy for them. That's what
makes the job
amazing.
So what is the new thing you're doing in the last 2 years? Sorry, by the way, I've become the interviewer.
Sorry.
मेरे 2 इमोशंस आए थे. पहले मुझे लगा मैं थोड़ा जॉबलेस सा हो गया हूँ, लेकिन मैं अभी क्या हो रहा है, इतना बढ़िया एक स्टूडेंट मोड में आ गया हूँ. मुझे समझ में आ रहा है कि मैंने कैसे करना है. तो मेरी बड़ी अच्छी ट्रेनिंग हो रखी है. तो आप ये नहीं होता आपके गाड़ी खरीद ली.
ये बहुत टेक्निकल कॉमेडी वाला में हम चले गए हैं.
ये बहुत जबरदस्त है और इससे ना मैं बहुत कुछ सीख रहा हूँ. प्रेजेंटेशन सीख रहा हूँ. मैं बहस करने के बारे में सीख रहा हूँ कि कैसे मुद्दों को जोड़ के रखना है. और कॉमेडी को लेके लोग इतना दिमाग लगाते हैं, दुनिया को पता ही नहीं है इतना.
लोगों को कई बार बहुत अजीब लगता है कि अरे अच्छा आपको बड़ी नॉलेज है.
If I go to a trial show and I'm trying new jokes, right? I try and say the joke in the most boring way possible to test whether the joke is good enough or not. Because I also know no matter how shit the joke is, and I think Chris Rock talks about this as well, I can Papa CJ it up. By sheer force of delivery and personality. It's like Chris Rock talks about the same thing. He says, I can Chris Rock it up. They will laugh. Right? But the joke may not be good. Like I have worked with so many comedians all over the world. There are some of them who have great material. Right? Zero stage personality or presence. There are some of them who have no material. Right? And I know this because I can do this. I've done this for many years. No material. By sheer force of personality and spontaneity. So my question to you is, when you're trying new stuff, because I do this, I purposely try and be terrible from the performance point of view. So I can just test the joke whether it's strong enough. Because, so that's one part, one of question. Part 2 of the question is, see, there's a, how do you know, you're very famous now. How do you know that you are still good? Right? Because when you start out early, an audience is judging you.
You have to
based
earn
on
every
your
laughter.
Comedy. You have to earn every laughter. Now, one fame will anyway buy Amit Tandon ko dekhenge. So they are laughing just because Amit Tandon bol raha hai. Amit bol raha hai to yaar kya scene hai? Is there a way for you to separate yourself from the fame, from the brand Amit Tandon? Just for yourself to know that, boss, if I was a new act today telling this joke, it would still kill.
So, first part, trial shows, no, I don't, like in terms of delivery, I don't. What I do in delivery is, I try to change my delivery in different shows to see what works better. Is it the angry delivery that is working, or is it when I'm having fun that works? How do I change my emotions within it? कि अलग-अलग emotion में वो same set perform करके देख लिया. Second, what happens for me in trial shows now is that, one, I've figured out that 20-year-old is not my audience. Okay, when I do my jokes, when I'm talking about, my family, my marriage, if I'm talking about my fights with my wife, they don't get it at all. So I need to do trial shows. I can't do open mics. Open mics become very tough for me because they're all youngsters. उसके हिसाब से चलूंगा तो मुझे पता है नहीं चल रहा है. ठीक है. मैं trial shows, I do every size of room. You can get, I think you can get laughter in the first 5-10 minutes because of being Amit Tandon, but after that you have to earn it.
Yes.
उसके बाद लोग नहीं हंसेंगे. And when the trial shows happen, there are sizes in which trial shows happen. There's J Spot where 70-80 people will turn up, but there are smaller rooms. So there's a room called Spades, जिसमें total space ही 15 का है. And one weekend I did my trial show and 15, seats were gone, but out of them, 8 people didn't turn up on that day. When you perform for 7 people, you actually get to know how good you are.
Amit Tandon performed.
You
for
are,
7.
there, everybody will have a different emotion.
What?
There is no mob. और वही मुझे लगता है कि if you've not done the tough rooms, I'm sorry, but I think in a lot of cases when I see so many comedy clubs and all the rooms are so well, I'm like, no. You have to do those rooms where people don't laugh, people don't applaud. You are competing with their liquor, you're competing with their food.
Yeah.
That's where you develop your comedy muscle. That's where you develop that muscle ki bhai mujhe dekh.
What are some of the other elements or structures within a show?
I think it's largely that. What I can talk more about, I think what I have started doing in the last 2-3 years, because for me what happens is every year I want to do at least one thing new in my comedy.
Okay, I also want to, so tell me about the new, but I also eventually, now that we've got the small pieces, I also want to understand, okay, that's your ABCD, right? Then you've got a routine. One of the things that really bothers me in India is that they call it a set. It's actually a routine. Right? Because the whole performance is called a set when you perform at a comedy club. Anyway, you've got a routine about a certain bit. Now, wo tera paragraph ho gaya. How do you structure the entire show? How do you know what to start with, what to end with? Is there a certain...
that is developed over a period of time. There'll be 5 different sets. Yeah. Then the stitching part is the toughest one for me, where you have to go from one set to another and you have to find the bridge that takes you from one to the other.
But when you're stitching it together, are you doing it based on the flow of the story? Are you doing it based on... So we all know you've got to end really strong. You also know you've got to start strong enough. And beech mein wo strong week kar sakte hai. Are you looking at the strength or the quality of those routines or sets, as people call it? Or are you looking at the chronological flow? How do you...
Chronological. What I do is that first 2 minutes, get them a very strong laughter. Okay, so they are set. They are warmed up well enough into the show. Then get into your sets. I would typically get into my sets in the chronological order कि ये flow में कैसे set बैठ रहा है.
Okay.
क्योंकि otherwise, when it's a 1.5 hour show, sometimes it's very tough to even remember किसके बाद क्या आया था.
ये होता है जब 40+ comedians होते हैं ना, हमें chronology करनी पड़ती है because नहीं तो याद ही नहीं आएगा बस.
ना कुछ नहीं होता है. So with new show, that's what happens is when you're doing your new show, your performance, one more thing I think anyway is a little looser, because that time I'm carrying a diary with me. Because then I'll be like, okay, let me see if I've missed out on something. वो हो जाता है थोड़ा सा आपका बीच में. You will anyway pause because you're like, अरे कोई पंच मिस तो नहीं हो गया इसमें से कि ये मेरा सेट इसके बारे में है, ये मेरा सेट इसके बारे में है. But within that, if there is something that I've missed out, so वो ऐसे वैसे भी ट्रायल शो में हो जाता है एडिशनल.
तो आप लेके आते हो गाड़ी, मोटरसाइकिल ले आए, और आप बड़ा प्यार से चला रहे हो अभी तो ना, आपने उसके वो नहीं उतार रखे होते आपने उसके जो
प्लास्टिक वाली सीट से,
और फिर एक लौंडा है आपके ग्रुप में कहता तू पीछे बैठ और वो कान मरोड़ देता बाइक के. आप समझ रहे
आगे प्लास्टिक उतार के उस लेके
बट राइड में मजा आ रहा था. तो मुझे बैक सीट ड्राइविंग बड़ा मजा आया. और जो सवाल आप लोग पूछ रहे हो ना, ये इतना तो डीप, मैं क्या मेरा कोई ऑडियंस नहीं सोच रहा होगा. तो जो कंटेंट मिला है बहुत यूजफुल होने वाला है. I think सिर्फ comedians के लिए नहीं है.
Actually, it's a wonderful conversation for both of us to have also, because our friendship is years and years old. Right? So we already have a camaraderie. We have immense mutual respect for each other. Right? But yet, we rarely get to have such a deep conversation about the craft. But I just want to add, Amit, you were talking about flexing the comedy muscle. One day when I really felt that I had flexed this comedy muscle. This was 2009. I was doing the Just for Laughs festival in Canada. Toronto mein shows ho rahe the, and I did 3 shows in one night. The first night I was performing at a comedy. The first show was a comedy club called Yuck Yucks. It's the most popular chain of clubs in Canada, and that's a regular comedy club. Joke, whatever, 20-25 minutes set. After that, I was performing on the top of an Irish pub. right? Comedy club had 250 people jammed in. This place had 15 people. So we sat at a dining table, right? And it was like having friends for dinner. And the performance was there. So that was like a conversation, storytelling, a different kind of energy. Then I went to perform in a room called the Vapor Room, right? So you go up on the first floor, comedian on stage, 50 different tables, chote tables, and there's a bong on each of them. Bong means the smoking one, not Bengali. Right? And everyone's smoking marijuana. I go to the bar, I said, can I get a whiskey, please? He said, sorry, sir, we can't give you a whiskey. We don't have an alcohol license. Right? But everyone's smoking marijuana. Now, this show is so interesting because you get on stage, you crack a joke, and then you wait. Right? After 1 minute, the first guy, and then slowly the laugh goes, right? And तुम्हारा 5 minute का set आधा घंटा चल जाता है. But I still remember thinking that it was so interesting because over the course of one night, just the way you perform and have to engage an audience and get them on your side is so different that you really feel यार क्या अलग-अलग muscle workout हो गए.
ऐसे शो के बाद मजा बहुत आता है आदमी को. You know, when it goes well, you're like very, very happy. I remember Jonathan Atherton once he did was doing some comedy festival, Singapore, Malaysia, and Malaysia they had put up a Indian show. Like they had announced that Indian show, so it was Hindi show supposed to be. Biswa, me and Jiveshu. Biswa का visa नहीं हुआ, तो me and Jiveshu were going to perform. एंड वो वहाँ जो क्लब था, कॉमेडी क्लब है ना केएल में,
क्रैक हाउस
कॉमेडी क्लब, ब्यूटीफुल क्लब, वेरी नाइस प्लेस फॉर कॉमेडी एंड ऑल. एंड आई थिंक 7 बजे का शो है, एंड 200 सीटर, आई थिंक 120 पीपल केम, आउट ऑफ विच 2 वर इंडियंस, ऑल अदर्स वर वाइट. And Jonathan is looking at me and Jiveshu कि this was supposed to be a Hindi show. हम भी एक दूसरे को देख रहे हैं कि ये करेंगे क्या हम. But now there are white people, क्या करेंगे? And Jonathan is very, nervous कि क्या होगा. A very sweet guy now. He died, I think, 2-3 years ago. And finally we decided कि कर लेंगे यार, English में करेंगे. And then we did a coin toss कि कौन पहले जाएगा, कौन बाद में जाएगा.
Who's gonna bite the bullet?
So Jiveshu went on stage first, okay, and although he does his entire set in Hindi, but his English is amazing. Like he talks in English. वो normally बात करोगे 90% of the time he talks in English, but है Hindi comedian because his punches are like ta. तेरी माँ यहाँ गई थी, तेरा बाप यहाँ गया था. So he just did half an hour of interaction, went very well, very funny, he's talking to people, acha toilet, how does the toilet happen here? I went, I thought this is a tissue, we wash, ye wo. And I can see it's going well, but what I was doing was that I was writing on paper all my sets and trying to put them in English, convert them to English. In that half an hour, I, translated my punchlines into English, all of it. Then I went on stage and I did 35 minutes and it went so well. Wow. It went so well, and that's so satisfying when you've won a tough room. Like we've done big rooms, but the satisfaction of doing that.
My experience with this. Firstly, there's a backstory to Jiveshu as well. He was invited to perform at the Comedy Store in Bombay, and when it was a comedy store, they only wanted you to perform in English, right? So he had come and he had performed in English, and I don't think it went particularly well, or he wasn't happy, or whatever the case was. So he had come and he was talking to me, saying, CJ, yaar, ye hua, this, what should I do? They don't allow this. I said, see, next time you go, you get on stage and you do what you do. तू हिंदी करता है ना, तू हिंदी कर. बाद में देखी जाएगी. They can't take you off stage in the middle. They've already booked you for the weekend. Had
this attitude कि तू जा, जो तेरे मन में ना वो कर क्या.
He went and he killed it. After that, firstly, they kept booking him, but he always had to close the show because nobody can follow him after that. Wow. So when we spoke earlier in our conversation about being authentic and being you, whatever it is that your language is, you got to do that.
You have to be very honest on stage. But now I have a question, CJ. because you end up doing a lot of interaction in your crowd work. And I think it's your preferred way of doing comedy also. But isn't it sometimes like what if because sometimes it can get hostile, especially in India. I've seen people get very defensive sometimes कि नहीं उधर बात करो या बात नहीं करनी है.
So I don't see that happen. I think also because, okay, question, have you ever seen it get hostile with me on stage?
No, but I've seen it with like
Exactly.
people.
Because I'll tell you why I've never struggled with that. I was talking to Nishant earlier, and I said, as a comedian, when I'm interacting with an audience, I have no problem teasing them. I have no problem embarrassing them. But I'm not a hurtful person. Right? I have no problem if somebody walks out and says, "Yaar, CJ ne to meri baja di yaar." No problem. But I don't want a single person to walk out thinking mujhe bura laga. And that's not who I am. So I think when I'm interacting with an audience, they sense my energy, they sense my intent. So I'm never hurtful. So as a result, I don't get that. And also over the years, I sense the energy of a person. If they look like they don't want to be talked to, you can tell, you back off, right? You talk to people, you take a conversation, you find a great punchline, boom, get out of there. But the second you talk to people and you can see that they're hesitant, you'll just throw in a line, यार मैं तो actually sir आपको देख के डर गया. You look like the kind of CJ तूने कुछ और बोला, पटाक मारा. मैं आप मेरे साथ बात करोगे, आपसे इतनी डरने लगी. You figure out a way to deflect. But I don't have hostile audiences because I'm not a hostile comedian. I think that's just how it is.
नहीं, but corporates में I've seen people are scared कि यार jokes travel office. कि आज उसकी बेइज्जती करी है ना तो लोग उसकी बजाएंगे आगे जाने के बाद. So there is this reluctance, and I think good that comedians are a bit sensitive about this whole thing and pick up. And this animal instinct is important, but kind of you look into eyes and you understand कि बंदा झेलेगा कि नहीं लेगा.
By the way, talking about crowd work, I remember once Abhish told me this. He said, CJ, you are the most heckled comedian in the country. And I think the reason for it is that you are asking for it. And I think he might not be wrong. I'm like,
but and sometimes people say crowd work में निकाल दिया show. But the thing is, मतलब I have a lot of respect for crowd work because thinking on your feet and whatever CJ might say, there is a structure to crowd work also. I strongly believe there is a structure to crowd work. It's not just that you can randomly go and ask people and just talk to them, bajadi and move on.
Have you understood the structure?
No.
I'm saying जब समझ में आ जाए मेरे को बता देना.
But there's a science behind it. There's still a way of doing crowd work. It's not like everybody's cup of tea. It's not like ये क्राउड वर्क इसलिए कर रहा है क्योंकि ये लिख के नहीं लाया. अरे उसको आता है, तेरे को आता है तो तू कर ले ना. वो नहीं होता है हर एक से. Like I can't do crowd work. I'll probably talk to 2-3 people, but then I have to come back to my set. Correct. Because I know कि नहीं है यार मेरे
syllabus में नहीं है.
मेरे नहीं है. That's not how my brain is wired. When I'm on stage, I'm like this. कि this. I'm not like कि आओ बात करें. And these are very different wirings within comedy also.
और अमित, आपका जो ब्रांड है ना, वो जिस तरह हम जब बात करते लोगों से, तो आप एक किस्म की टाइम मशीन भी हो. यू आर टेलीपोर्टर. यू काइंड ऑफ डू मास ट्रांसपोर्टेशन 30 साल 35 साल 40 साल पीछे. वो लोग ना ये नहीं बैठा कि चलो आज से अमित से बेइज्जती करा के आएंगे टाइम से, चलो बातें करेंगे.
अब ये हो गया कि अब वो क्राउड भी वो वाला आ रहा है. अब क्राउड भी वो वाला आ रहा है. बट फ्रॉम द बिगनिंग आई हैव ऑलवेज फाउंड crowd work very daunting. I've never been comfortable doing crowd work. Like even if they'll tell me that इससे बात कर लेना, आप इससे बात कर सकते हैं. I'm like 2 बात करूँगा, इससे ज़्यादा नहीं करूँगा. I can't like get into that too much. I just want to come back and I'm like देखो मैं अपना syllabus लिख के लाया हूँ.
मेरी पर्ची वही लिखा.
मैं ये बात करूंगा।
Whereas I come there thinking यार मैंने कुछ नहीं लिखा।
That's not true. He prepares a lot for shows. I have seen him preparing for shows. I've seen him preparing. We did a college show together. So he'll spend 3 hours talking to the the students to find out what works, what doesn't. So a lot of that goes into behind the the curtains, which people don't realize.
That's true. I do a lot of customization. Whatever the show is, there is so much customized to that audience. I have had college students come to me afterwards saying, "तू अपने college में पढ़ता है क्या? Like, how do you know so much about this? There are people in the college who don't know. When I do that for companies, I know because I've got secrets from 50 different people. वो तो सिर्फ अपने दोस्त से बात करता है. It is
But risky नहीं है ये, मतलब देखो मैंने कुछ एक comedians के साथ काम करा है. And promise was custom show. And there is a percentage, a substantial one जहाँ पे show इतना नहीं चला. क्योंकि जो आपके
क्योंकि तुमने बजट नहीं निकाला और अमित टंडन और पापा सीजे को बुक नहीं किया. दिस इज योर फॉल्ट. कॉमेडियन की गलती नहीं है. और बोलो.
नहीं, but all kinds of shows happen. We also have bad days.
और वो आपसे पूछूंगा जब आपका नंबर आएगा. बट क्योंकि मैं आप दोनों एक साथ हैं इस मोमेंट पे और बहुत ही जबरदस्त इत्तेफाक है ये चीज. तो कैन आई एक्चुअली आस्क some questions that are coming to my mind right now?
Of course, आपका पॉडकास्ट है सर.
तो मैं तो
हम तो सिर्फ गाड़ी घुमाने आए थे.
बाइक तुम्हारी है, व्हीली हम मारेंगे.
By the way, what him and I just did, that's called a callback. A callback. Because you spoke about the gadi and the bike before. We have referenced that. Instant laugh. That is a tool in comedy which is called a callback.
बट ये क्लोजिंग में भी कई बार मैं देखा कमेडियंस यूज करते हैं कि यार वो छोड़ा था कुछ तो लाके वहां
वापस. That's a call. Callback is one of the best ways of ending a show. It's one of the best ways. That's something that I know about crowd interaction, for example, that a lot of times when comedians will pick on people, so they'll speak to a couple and this and that, and then they are telling a story which is completely unrelated, their own set, and then say और फिर एक बंदा था जो ये ना कपिल की तरह ही थोड़ा पैसे बचा के चलता. It becomes suddenly twice as funny because now you can see the character. ये बहुत हरामी था कपिल की तरह ही. So
निशांत जैसे तुमने प्रोफाइल भेज दिया ना कि अरे सीजे पॉडकास्ट के लिए आओ, फिर वो डिजाइनर शर्ट पहन के आता है, वो इतने छोटे से कप में चाय पिलाता है
ठंडी.
Why, what was the college show we did?
IIT Kanpur.
Oh, I got banned from IIT Kanpur.
Is it?
Yeah, I've got this email from the Dean of Student Affairs, right? Who has written that your performance was, I forgot, it was
profanity.
I've not profanity, but see, मैंने student से बात की. They gave me all the masala about all the things that are unfair and wrong. तो मैंने वो use करके, तो एक तो मेरे पीछे पड़ गया, किसने बताया तुम्हें? ऐसे मैं थोड़ी बताऊंगा यार, right? And see, the problem is I get banned from 80% of the colleges that I perform at.
तो ये एक्चुअली 3 नॉर्थ इंडियन है इस टाइम कैमरा के, 3 कैमरे 3 नॉर्थ इंडियंस. मैं मतलब लिबर्टी ले रहा हूँ आपको भी नॉर्थ इंडियन के लिए बिकॉज यू कम फ्रॉम दिल्ली. ये 5-6 साल से दिल्ली के कॉमेडियंस ने धूम मचा रखी है. मैं 20-22 साल से हूँ इवेंट्स एंटरटेनमेंट स्पेस में, एंड लाइक वी वर डिस्कसिंग, शुरुआत में इंग्लिश कॉमेडी थी. कॉमेडी वाज अंग्रेजी कॉमेडी, खत्म बात है ना. और बाकी सब मिमिक्री आर्टिस्ट हो गए जो कि नकल कर रहे हैं. बट ये पिछले 6-7 साल 8 साल अगर मैं कह पाऊँ, धूम मचा रखी है. इंटरनेट पे धूम मचा रखी है, लाइव शोज में मचा रखी है, और इंटरनेशनल शोज हो रहे हैं. 3-3, 4-4 हज़ार लोग टिकट्स लेके बाहर शोज देखने आ रहे हैं. क्या हो क्या रहा है, मतलब दिल्ली में ऐसा क्या चूरन बट रहा है कि मतलब आग लगी है दिल्ली कॉमेडियंस की?
आई थिंक 3-4 फैक्टर्स हैं. सो जो दिल्ली है, अगर आप देखो कॉमेडियन सिर्फ दिल्ली से नहीं है, वो दिल्ली के आसपास के एरिया से भी आके दिल्ली आए और दिल्ली से फिर आगे बढ़े. चाहे जाकिर है, बस्सी है, सब. एक तो वहाँ पे कहानियाँ बहुत सारी हैं, मुझे लगता है वहाँ कैरेक्टर्स अब ना, मतलब अब वो Tier 1 सिर्फ नहीं रह गई कॉमेडी, ठीक है. Tier 2, Tier 3 की स्टोरीज अब बाहर आ रही हैं, ठीक है. सेकंड क्या है, दिल्ली में आई थिंक Delhi rooms are way more unforgiving than Mumbai rooms. मुंबई ऑडियंस इतनी प्यारी है, इतनी मक्खन है, वो हंस देते हैं, वो ताली भी बजा देंगे. एंड रूम्स भी सारे ऐसे हैं कि एक लाइट लगी, एक स्टेज है एंड 40 लोग बैठ के सिर्फ तुमको सुन रहे हैं. दिल्ली में जहाँ हमने परफॉर्म करा है, रेस्टोरेंट्स में, बार मेरे पीछे यहाँ है, कैफे ओज, राइट, मैं यहाँ खड़ा हूँ, लिटरली इतना ही डिस्टेंस, बार है और बार चल रहा है, लोग बियर खरीद रहे हैं वहाँ से, मुझे वहाँ परफॉर्म कर रहा है. तो वो जो जिन चीज़ों से हम compete कर रहे थे ना, और वहाँ पे बहुत आम बात है कि आप स्टेज पे परफॉर्म कर रहे हैं, रेस्टोरेंट है, पब है, एंड पीपल आर लाइक, अरे यार बस करो यार, बंद करो यार, खाना खाना है हमने, या वो बर्थडे का केक काट रहे हैं, वो हैप्पी बर्थडे शुरू हो गया बीच में, all those things. So when you like, it's like when you run that much, you know, uphill.
People come to comedy clubs with guns, yaar.
Wow.
हाँ, गन्स निकली हुई हैं, चाकू लगा हुआ है किसी को, all of that. So that is like, वो extreme हो गए, but still the thing is कि when the audience is more unforgiving, then you have to make more effort to be funny. You have to spend more time winning them. So your comedy muscle, I think, gets stronger. And second, there's a way more variety of, you know, stories that are coming out as compared to...
I think there's one more reason. I'm going a few years behind that, at least when comedy started. So I had started the circuit in Delhi in early 2009.
2009, हाँ.
A little later in 2009, the Comedy Store opened in Bombay. Now, the Comedy Store in Bombay had a very big influence on comedy in Bombay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, they wanted a certain kind of comedian. You get 5 minutes. We want setup, punchline, setup, punchline. A lot of people started doing setup in English, punchline in Hindi, with one gali thrown in.
Packaging.
Right? And just the fact that in those days somebody got on stage and said "Bhai chod," all was enough. Right? For the mature audiences, theek hai, ek baar sun liya, do baar sun liya, but where's the joke? Now what happened in Delhi was you didn't have to be formulaic to fit the spot that the only comedy club in town was offering you. As a result, you got to be more authentic and genuine. So the people you got, their performance style wasn't as slick, right? But they were more genuine and they may be rustic or whatever you may choose to call it. But it wasn't as factory processed कि आप चार को साथ में डाल दो, they all sound similar in terms of their rhythm and their beat. Right? Whereas you take a Delhi comic,
Bombay में comedy में है ये चीज़.
Whereas
there's a predictable pattern. Prototype लगता है.
Whereas if you take a lot of Delhi comics, at least the early days, each of them has their own unique voice because they're not trying to fit in. And at least I tried in whatever capacity I could, at least in the early days, to say you be you do what works for you. Right? I remember Raghav Mandava. He's probably one of the better MCs in the country today.
Yeah, one of the best.
I remember the first time he hosted a show. I got him to host at the night I was organizing. I said, get up, you host. After the first half, he got off and he said, CJ, ye mere se hota nahi. I'm like, fuck off, you're getting back on stage. Right? So you have to encourage people to be themselves. I remember a few years ago, Zakir and I happened to be in town doing a corporate gig in the Hyderabad mein the. So I had called him to Durma, I said, chale, aaja, biryani khate. We were eating together. I'm just talking about what he does. And he spoke about the fact that he played sitar. Right? I was like, why is this not in the public domain?
He's a national level sitar player. He's
Exactly. But I was like, why is this not on stage? Why is this not a, you know? So the second you have people who are just comfortable being themselves, right? I mean, today, like he spoke about when we were offline about, you know, competitiveness. I don't think I have any competition. He has no competition. Nobody can be a better Amit Tandon than Amit Tandon. Right? If you're trying to be somebody else, it's not going to happen. But if you can genuinely be you, आपका कोई competition ही नहीं है.
I think finding your voice is very important. It's a very important part of your journey. In fact, partly I think, probably not completely, but once you find your voice, nobody can steal your jokes. Because, like, when I tell my story, मेरे ही बच्चे हैं ना जो 19 साल के और 17 साल के, कोई और है ही नहीं. Like you watched my show yesterday. You know, if somebody else wants to come in and do those jokes, they can't even pull it off because I'm talking about teenage kids. As a parent, करके देख ले तू.
You can't steal my jokes also because I don't have any. I only have crowd.
So वो एक है कि finding your own voice. Yeah, and that happens. You know, when you, and that's another thing. You know, when you start hanging out with comedians all the time, then you will start sounding similar to each other. Because you talk the same formula, you talk. वो 6 लोगों के सेट एक जैसी सुनाई देंगे. Like there are almost you know routines एक जैसे सुनाई देंगे. क्योंकि होता क्या है कि मतलब कुछ formula sets होते हैं, which I'm sorry to say but are very easy to write. Formula sets, I'll tell you what is a formula set. एक मूवी उठाई और उसके बारे में बोल दिया तुमने कि इसकी तो स्टोरी ऐसी है, ठीक है, इसकी स्टोरी में मतलब ये दिखाया, बताओ ये हो सकता है. You know, even if you just narrate the story, it's funny by itself. It will get you laughs, but nobody takes away anything from there. ठीक है, it's nothing that's memorable. You know, it's nothing that nobody else can do. Or you pick up signs that are written everywhere. कि मैं यहाँ आ रहा था तो यहाँ पे ये लिखा होता stop before looking, you know, or something of that sort. And how random is this sign? It's easy to, I think it's, you know, and they will all sound the same finally.
Also,
जो बहुत दिखता है.
yeah, what I used to find very sad was that, especially in, you know, I find जब आप इस लेवल पे हो ना, कोई फाइटिंग नहीं होती शुरू में. जब आप इस लेवल पे हो कोई फाइटिंग नहीं होती. ये जो बीच का होता है ना, right? And what I used to find really sad was I used to see comics in green rooms. There is so much peer pressure because they are trying to impress the people in the green room more than the audience. Right? And everyone is analyzing the set of that comic and saying, इसमें ठीक नहीं था, इसमें. You should be encouraging each other. ठीक नहीं था तो उसको help करके improve करो ना. Right? So that, I think negativity and peer pressure.
Jonathan Atherton said na कि if you don't want to remain an open micer, stop hanging out with open micers, which is so true. This is true for, I think, every line, whether it's, you know, acting. You know, if you don't want to remain a struggling actor, stop, you know, hanging around with struggling actors. Rather work on your craft or try to find a way to improve. Because otherwise क्या है कि अब हम अगर यहाँ पे जो 6 लोग बैठे हैं, हम सारे struggling है ना, मैं better करूँगा ना तो मुझे शर्म आनी शुरू हो जाएगी कई बार.
And who's going to show you the example of what is better?
हाँ.
But I remember when we started the circuit in Delhi, there was such a supportive atmosphere.
तो मेरा लास्ट सवाल है इस कॉन्वर्सेशन में कि आप दोनों एक सिमिलर से एनवायरनमेंट से आए हो, है ना? हालांकि बैकग्राउंड अलग है, आपका प्रोफेशनल बैकग्राउंड अलग है, यू हैव योर ओन जर्नी फ्रॉम योर अदर ज्योग्राफी एंड एजुकेशन फ्रॉम देयर, एंड यू बीन ऑन द सेम, you know, cooking station, if I can say. But how can you have such different ideologies when it comes to performances and different ways you gather energy from the audiences? आप महान सज्जन पुरुष की तरह परफॉर्म कर रहे होते हो, आप सिर्फ आदर बांट रहे होते हो, नो क्राउड वर्क, नोबडी.
नहीं, आई थिंक एक तो ये है कि हमारा थोड़ा अपब्रिंगिंग अलग है, और दूसरा ऐसा यार हर 2 लोग अलग है. एक घर में 2 भाई पैदा होते हैं, वो दोनों बिल्कुल अलग होते हैं. ये तो हम फिर भी अलग पेरेंटहुड और अलग स्कूल से आए हैं.
कुकिंग स्टेशन सेम है, ये वेज पका रहा है, मैं नॉन वेज पका रहा हूं.
आप तो मुझे शेयर की तरह आते हो भाई, मिल जाओ ना. आपने इकट्ठे शो करा है कभी?
बहुत बार मैंने बहुत शोज ओपन करे हैं सीजे के लिए.
लॉट्स ऑफ शोज यार. मेरे को मौका नहीं मिल रहा लाइक आई सेड.
न्यू फ्रेंड्स कॉलोनी में वो एक क्लब वाला शो था, वो भी मैंने एक बार ओपन करा था.
ओह, दैट वाज अ ग्रेट शो.
हां, दैट वाज अ ग्रेट शो. हाँ, उसके अगले साल मैंने वो करा था शो फिर.
यही होता है सर.
आप समझ रहे हो हम शो क्यों नहीं बुक कर पा रहे? आपका ये जवाब यहाँ बैठा.
यही होता था जब अमित यूज्ड टू ओपन, आई यूज्ड टू हेडलाइन, then Amit was headlining. Now the time has come for Amit to headline and for me to open. मौका मिल ही नहीं रहा यार.
But see, I tell comedians even now, I tell them these stories that this is what we did, and I tell them before they get on stage when they are opening for you, I'm like, why are you opening for me? तेरे पास 5 मिनट है, तुझे आज नॉर्मली तेरे को 10 लोग देखने आते हैं, तुझे आज 1000 लोग देख रहे हैं, ठीक है? तो तेरा काम ये है कि यहाँ से एक शो निकाल ताकि लोग तेरे को जान सके, क्योंकि यहाँ तो सीखने वाला कुछ नहीं है खास, ओपन करने में तो ऐसा कुछ खास नया सीखने वाला नहीं है। 1000 लोगों में 1000 लोग हंस देंगे, ठीक है, वो तो हंस ही देंगे, बट you know, जैसे what happens is as a new comedian what people do is that they'll get on stage, they'll do their bit, either they'll leave or they'll be in the green room hanging around, you know, they'll watch your show and they'll be in the green room. Like, you should not be in the green room.
Be out.
After the show, if you've done well in opening the show, go hang around in the crowd. Somebody will take your card, get your cards there. You know, give your cards. Stage पे जा रहे हो, 2 बार अपना नाम बोलो, शुरू में भी बोलो कि hi, I am Amit Tandon. When you close and you know you're calling the main act that please welcome on stage Amit, you know, Papa CJ, this is Amit Tandon, you know, ये वो. Let them know your name, be around so that somebody else can book you after that.
Also, you want to learn by watching how the other comedian performs. Like, I watch almost zero comedy online. Almost zero. Give me a live show.
I watch a lot of live shows. I also watch a lot of
the amount you learn from how somebody handles an audience. As a new comic, I was telling him earlier, I have spent 2,000 hours in cars with comedians who have been doing comedy for between 10 and 20 years. Seeing how they prepare, seeing how they perform, seeing how they analyze it afterwards. I have gone to a room, I have struggled, seen somebody come after that and destroy it. Yeah, your mind is blowing. How the hell did he do it? They were laughing at nothing. So the amount you learn from that, and you have always got to, comedy is a very humbling profession. The second you think, मेरे को पता है ना, घसीट के ज़मीन पे, you have to always keep learning, always keep trying and be very humble. You write a great show, you tour it great. When you start writing a new show, you are as good as somebody who has been doing it for 6 weeks. You are useless.
अरे ये तो मैंने बोला भी था किसी कॉमेडियन को, सर, यू नो, somebody was opening for me and he's like, सर आपका तो बढ़िया है, आपका तो शो चल रहा है, हमारा तो वही स्ट्रेस रहता है कि अगले 5 मिनट लिखने हैं और नए 5 मिनट. मैं कहा मेरा स्ट्रेस है मुझे एक नया शो लिखना है पूरा, तो वो स्ट्रेस तो सेम ही है, तू तो 10 मिनट भी लिख सकता है, साल में तेरा चल जाएगा अभी, मेरे को 1 घंटा लिखना पड़ेगा.
One of the best pieces of advice I got is that it's very important for you to grow in the dark. Once you hit the limelight, you don't have the freedom to screw up. Today, you are an open micer, you have the freedom to be as shit as possible. Try, experiment. Right? Tomorrow, if you are Amit Tandon, he can't afford to have a shit show. Trial show baat alag hai, but he cannot afford to have a bad show because he is now brand Amit Tandon. But even brand Amit Tandon has to go to open mic nights and grow in the dark and try new things.
There is no other way of improving.
और हमारे प्रोफेशन में you have a good show, you walk off thinking, boss, I am the king. In a bad show, you get feedback every 15 seconds. If they're not laughing, and if you don't have the experience and expertise to adapt, you have to ask yourself on the way home, if I'm ever again in the same country with a similar audience, what will I do differently? You only learn from bad shows.
So it's not in the sequence how the conversation goes, but I've been thinking, after a show, have you received like very bad messages on social media DM, like which are like threatening? ऐसा, do you get those messages and do you read those messages?
I have.
You have?
I have.
See, Amit has because he's a married man. Right? I am a single man. I am flirting with the audience afterwards to think, यार मैं लूडो खेल रहा हूँ कि छी आ जाए.
But मतलब how do you deal with this?
2 तरीके के हैं, ठीक है. एक तो ये है कि जैसे you know, now there's a certain kind of audience that comes. 3 generations come together also. Like a lot of shows, there'll be, you know, they'll have their 10-year-old, 12-year-old kids, parents and the grandparents as well. You know, so वो 60, 40, 13 और वो 13, 14 वाले, हाँ, वो पूरा. So people come because now, you know, there's a certain image that I have that it's clean comedy. And it's happened 3-4 times where even when I have told my opening act that keep it clean, okay, you know, that's the audience, you know, that's what they've come for.
पर opening act के पास वही 5 मिनट है.
वही 5 मिनट, वो बता चुके हो तुम, सारा कुछ कर चुके हो. There's this girl, I'll not name the city, otherwise people will figure out, you know, and it's tier 2 city, and I told her, you know, clean रखना. कहती सर मैं clean रखूँगी. And ठीक है, and then she goes on stage and starts with a set about how she was discussing intercourse with her mother. And complete silence. And the more silence, the dirtier the set got, because that's what they knew कि उसके laugh आएगा.
Yeah.
8 minutes into the set, silence, and she comes back. I do my set, it goes well. And then next day, I got 3-4 big messages that if we had known, we would have come in 10 minutes late. What was that girl doing? Ye hai, wo hai. And I was like, and I forwarded those to her, ki bhai, this is what I'm getting from people. Because, देखो, opening act है, तेरा show नहीं है. Show उसका है. ठीक है? So if CJ has asked me, can you go and do 10 minutes for me?
अश्लील क्योंकि मेरी ऑडियंस है.
But if he's told me, and if he gives me 3 instructions, do this, don't talk to people, or do this, I'll stick to it, or I'll tell CJ I can't do this. Right? Either of those things. कि पूरा इंग्लिश में करना है तो CJ शायद थोड़ा हिंदी निकल जाएगा, you know, or whatever. Although CJ never gave any instructions. He's like, go do what you want to do. But if he's told me anything, my first thing is to ensure that I don't screw up his show.
Of course.
ठीक है? It's not my show. It's his show. ठीक है? I am getting 10 minutes because of him. The client didn't book me.
But you know what is sometimes harder for a main act? When the opening act goes and destroys.
ये भी होता है.
And there are different comedians who have a different mindset on this. Some of them will purposely want them to not be that good. But if somebody goes and is really good, then boss, you gotta follow that. Because तुम तो यहाँ से start करके वहाँ ले जाओगे ना. This person has already taken it there. In fact, when you're emceeing a show, a lot of people don't realize the job of the MC is to warm up the audience, bring them up to here, and then pass it to the next act. If that act does badly, their job is to bring it up over here.
Correct.
What they don't realize is if the next act does really well, they have to bring it down and give it to them. Unless, of course, they know the next person is going to. But my audience, like Amit's, I get age 16 to age 80. Except मैं शुरू में बोल देता हूँ, अगर आप अपने माता पिता या बच्चों के साथ बैठे हो, now is the time for you to change places. Because it's like when you're sitting at home and watching a movie and one of those scenes comes, everyone is enjoying but you don't know where to look. तो अलग ही बैठ जाओ, सब enjoy करेंगे.
Wow. Sounds good. देखो, मुझे मेरे पॉडकास्ट के लिए बहुत धांसू बोनस कंटेंट मिल गया है आपके टाइमिंग की वजह से. मैं भले ही बेरोजगार सा महसूस करा, बट मैंने बड़े मजे लिए और मेरा बहुत भला हुआ है. तो मैं चाहता हूँ कि अगर आपके पास कुछ और इतने बढ़िया सवाल जो आपके आ रहे हैं कंटिन्यू करना चाहे, तो मैं तो चाहूँगा कि आप वापस से ड्राइविंग सीट पे आए.
नहीं, मैंने तो राइटिंग सीख लिया आज. क्राउड वर्क सिखा नहीं पाया, पर राइटिंग तो सीख लिया.
So if that is the case, we have small humble memento for you.
Check.
हाँ check करें. मैं तो sound check में बोलता हूँ, check cash. So Ritesh, if you can.
But you know, it's been. I just have to say, it's so wonderful that we were able to make this happen.
Because we caught up finally.
For the two of us to have a conversation. The other one thing that we should at some point talk about is heckling and how to deal with hecklers. You know, but India mein you don't really.
People don't really kind of trace you that badly.
Not that much. Not that much.
चलो बढ़िया है, अच्छी बात है, दुकान चलती रहेगी, हमारे साथ चलती रहेगी.
You know, I almost feel like telling him, Nishant, अपना ही podcast समझो.
मुझे बहुत सीखने को मिला है, बहुत कुछ सीखने को मिला. देखो, मैं एडमिट करना चाहूँगा, आज मेरी दूसरी शूट हो रही है. ठीक है, मुझे तो एंगल भी नहीं पता कैसे लिए जाते हैं. सीजे ने आगे बताया कि थोड़ा मैं सीट पे बैठूं, मेरा पेट नहीं दिखना चाहिए, तो मुझे लगा मैं तो इस बारे में सोचा ही नहीं.
कौन सा पेट यार, क्या कैसी गंदी बात कर रहा है यार.
कट